I mean, and these are limited evidently because they have to be funded by the private business to try and be prepared for these situations. But as you rightly say, if you have a group of individuals that unfortunately have not been under direct watch by the security services, these ones will slip through the net. And inevitably, we're going to have the critics who are going to come out in the wake of this incident to say the security services have failed us, they've allowed these individuals to get through. But the sheer mass, the insurmountable task that the services have in terms of the number of suspects, well in excess of 3,000. 3,000 is a conservative estimate, is crazy.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We'll stay with us. We're just going to head back to Downing Street. The Prime Minister is just speaking.
I have just chaired a meeting of the Government's Emergency Committee, and I want to update you with the latest information about the attack. Shortly before 10:10 yesterday evening, the Metropolitan Police received reports that a white van had struck pedestrians on London Bridge. It continued to drive from London Bridge to Borough Market, where 3 terrorists left the van and attacked innocent and unarmed civilians with blades and knives. All 3 were wearing what appeared to be explosive vests, but the police have established that this clothing was fake and worn only to spread panic and fear. As so often in such serious situations, the police responded with great courage and great speed. Armed officers from the Metropolitan Police and the City of London Police arrived at Borough Market within moments and shot and killed the 3 suspects. The terrorists were confronted and shot by armed officers within 8 minutes of the police receiving the first emergency call. 7 people have died as a result of the attack, in addition to the 3 suspects shot dead by the police. 48 people are being treated in several hospitals across London. Many have life-threatening conditions. On behalf of the people of London and on behalf of the whole country, I want to thank and pay tribute to the professionalism and bravery of the police and the emergency services, and the courage of members of the public who defended themselves and others from the attackers. And our thoughts and prayers are with the victims and with their friends, families, and loved ones. This is, as we all know, the 3rd terrorist attack Britain has experienced in the last 3 months. In March, a similar attack took place just around the corner on Westminster Bridge. 2 weeks ago, the Manchester Arena was attacked by a suicide bomber, and now London has been struck once more. And at the same time, the security and intelligence agencies and police have disrupted 5 credible plots since the Westminster attack in March. In terms of their planning and execution, the recent attacks are not connected. But we believe we are experiencing a new trend in the threat we face, as terrorism breeds terrorism, and perpetrators are inspired to attack, not only on the basis of carefully constructed plots after years of planning and training, and not even as lone attackers radicalized online, but by copying one another and often using the crudest of means of attack. We cannot and must not pretend that things can continue as they are. Things need to change, and they need to change in 4 important ways. First, while the recent attacks are not connected by common networks, they are connected in one important sense. They are bound together by the single evil ideology of Islamist extremism that preaches hatred, sows division, and promotes sectarianism. It is an ideology that claims our Western values of freedom, democracy, and human rights are incompatible with the religion of Islam. It is an ideology that is a perversion of Islam and a perversion of the truth. Defeating this ideology is one of the great challenges of our time, but it cannot be defeated through military intervention alone. It will not be defeated through the maintenance of a permanent defensive counter-terrorism operation, however skillful its leaders and practitioners. It will only be defeated when we turn people's minds away from this violence and make them understand that our values, pluralistic British values, are superior to anything offered by the preachers and supporters of hate. Second, we cannot allow this ideology the safe space it needs to breed. Yet that is precisely what the internet and the big companies that provide internet-based services provide. We need to work with allied democratic governments to reach international agreements that regulate cyberspace to prevent the spread of extremist and terrorism planning. And we need to do everything we can at home to reduce the risks of extremism online. Third, while we need to deprive the extremists of their safe spaces online, we must not forget about the safe spaces that continue to exist in the real world. Yes, that means taking military action to destroy ISIS in Iraq and Syria, but it also means taking action here at home. While we have made significant progress in recent years, there is, to be frank, far too much tolerance of extremism in our country. So we need to become far more robust in identifying it and stamping it out across the public sector and across society. That will require some difficult and often embarrassing conversations. But the whole of our country needs to come together to take on this extremism. And we need to live our lives not in a series of separated, segregated communities, but as one truly united kingdom. Fourth, we have a robust counter-terrorism strategy that has proved successful over many years. But as the nature of the threat we face becomes more complex, more fragmented, more hidden, especially online, the strategy needs to keep up. So in light of what we are learning about the changing threat, we need to review Britain's counter-terrorism strategy to make sure the police and security services have all the powers they need. And if we need to increase the length of custodial sentences for terrorism-related offences, even apparently less serious offences, that is what we will do. Since the emergence of the threat from Islamist-inspired terrorism, our country has made significant progress in disrupting plots and protecting the public. But it is time to say enough is enough. Everybody needs to go about their lives as they normally would. Our society should continue to function in accordance with our values. But when it comes to taking on extremism and terrorism, things need to change. As a mark of respect, the two political parties have suspended our national campaigns for today. But violence can never be allowed to disrupt the democratic process. So those campaigns will resume in full tomorrow. And the general election will go ahead, as planned, on Thursday. As a country, our response must be as it has always been when we have been confronted by violence. We must come together, we must pull together, and united, we will take on and defeat our enemies.
So the Prime Minister saying things cannot continue as they are. We cannot allow this ideology to prevail, just in terms of the political elements of what she was saying, stressing quite forcefully there the election will go ahead this Thursday. That was a key message. British general election on Thursday, June the 8th, and that will go ahead. We heard earlier in the day that the Conservatives and Labour have suspended their national campaigning today. That doesn't necessarily apply to all parties, but the election absolutely going ahead, says the Prime Minister. Let's go to our political correspondent, Ellie Price, who's following all of this. In fact, we weren't able to hear everything that Theresa May said from our vantage point here at London Bridge, Ellie, so you may well have picked up on some of that statement that I was unable to hear. Just explain some of the key points here, because this statement coming immediately after the end of the Cobra meeting.
Yeah, that's right. This was a robust statement from the Prime Minister, as you would expect, where she said that things need to change. Enough is enough. Everybody must go ahead with their daily lives, but there are certain changes that she feels need to be implemented. She talked about 4 different areas that needed to be looked at. She's talked about the fact that the theory, the ideology of Islamic extremism must finally be changed, that the perversion of Islam must be defeated, and it's only by defeating when people's minds are turned to this awful ideology that finally that it can be defeated. She also talked about the internet, and this is we know a key issue that the Prime Minister was looking at the meeting of G7 leaders at the end of last week, in which she said the internet and internet companies needed to take more responsibility in the dealings with some of these terrorists and the activities online, and she indicated that more needed to be done there. She also said that difficult and embarrassing conversations would need to be had here at home within some of the communities where she said were involved. And finally, she talked about reviewing counter-terrorism strategy. She said that may mean that custodial sentences, for example, for some terror-related offences, even those that were deemed to be less serious, may need to be looked at, and that custodial sentences may need to be increased. So, as you mentioned there too, she talked about everyday lives needing to go on. She talked about the fact that the 2 main political parties, the Conservatives and Labour, had suspended national campaigning for today, but she said that it would go ahead as of tomorrow because our democratic process, the election, could not be moved, and that democracy essentially would not be cowed. So some robust comments from the Prime Minister there, as you would expect, taking on a very serious tone of what's been going on. We didn't hear actually anything about the threat level. We expected that maybe that was something that has been potentially had been increased. She didn't mention anything about that in her statement there. The Cobra meeting, of course, was a meeting between her senior cabinet ministers as well as those senior security officials. So the meeting just happened, and she came out and made a statement after that.
Concurrently, perhaps egged on by each other. And that is what she says requires.
Ellie, thank you very much. Ellie Price there in Downing Street. Much more from her to come.